Well, welcome everybody. Those of us who are having this tech tutorial are the Keys team. So Keys team, if you do have a camera, will you show and wave so we know who we're talking about? My name is Nick Gillen, and I work with OSPI on this project, and this is the only project I work on at OSPI. I want to introduce Dr. Erin Stewart.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Erin Stewart. I am one of the special services directors at Puget Sound ESD, and I've also supported some of the work on this Keys grant.
All right, and Alicia.
Thank you. I'm Alicia Roberts-Frank, and I work for ESD 113 as a regional administrator for special programs, and I, like Erin, support the Keys work as well.
And Amy.
Good afternoon, Amy Hedlund. I am project coordinator for the Keys grant. I'm an employee of OSPI.
All right. And so the four of us have been cooperating since maybe January, if not a bit before, in the development of this grant. And we're excited to share some information today, but we want you to know that this won't be the last time you hear from us. This is a 4-year grant, 5-year grant with 4 years left. And we're going to be reliant on folks in your positions. And we have many of us here are special ed directors in different districts or have other affiliations. But hopefully you'll hear from us again, and you'll choose to participate in some upcoming opportunities that we'll share at the end of this presentation. Welcome. I want to take a moment for a land acknowledgement. We do this because far too often we forget that we are standing on ancestral homelands of Washington state's tribes and sovereign nations. So these are all photographs of Washington, and I'm happy to share this while we just reflect for a moment about where you sit. And if it is something that you know and you would like to share, put in the chat the tribal lands that you're on. And as you do that, maybe think about, this is not just a rote exercise, but it's a conscious opportunity to be more mindful of the destructive legacy that the state education system in many ways has had for tribal populations, and also the opportunity we have to do differently. This is just a small gesture, but it's an opportunity to add this information not only to the chat box, but just to your own mindset, because as we start talking about special education and educator shortages, we need to remember that we really must consider benefit and opportunity for sovereign tribal nations and the children and families there. So I'm in Tacoma, which is the traditional lands of the Puyallup. And thank you for those who are participating in the chat box, but also those who are participating mindfully on your own. Today, we'll give you an overview of the Keys grant. This is an acronym. We work at OSPI, so it's mandatory that we have acronyms. Keeping exceptional special educators. That's what that is. And it really focuses on just that. What is it we need to know about retention of special educators? What are the system pressures that are involved? What are some of the actions and opportunities that can help with retention? And it's tough to talk about retention without also talking about recruitment and induction and training. And so we think about that broadly, but we're really focused on moving the needle is on retention. So we'll share a little bit about our grant. We'll share about the state and local trends related to educators. We have some just preliminary analysis of special and general education educator data. We've conducted a survey recently of novice educators. So that is first year, second year, third year special education teachers all over the state. And we interviewed them, or rather we surveyed them with a questionnaire about mentoring. And what we heard back was a lot about mentoring, but we heard about a lot of other needs for support as well. And so we want to talk to you about that and what those findings were and what some of those implications were. And also to get your feedback. How does this strike you? How does this look in your area? And then we'll talk about what are some systems support ideas, options, and strategies. This is not a silver bullet type problem. There is not one thing that's going to work. Ideally, we identify these are the things that are working, that have been tried, that could be tried more or in different places. These are some things that have maybe been tried elsewhere that we could try here. or these are some things that haven't ever been thought of before that we could really invest some time in building out. So we'll have shared conversation around that as well. These system supports could include comprehensive induction programs, and then support school community work context, work environment type work. So that's what we'll do today. We're also going to tell you about some grant opportunities that are coming soon that you may be able to take advantage of to address this work where you live. Okay, so our Keeping Exceptional Special Educators grant focuses on building a statewide plan, which will involve kind of regional cooperation, also district cooperation. None of this is going to be a have to. These are things you have to do, but really an organization of effective ideas that you might want to try. Okay. We're trying to create data resources as well and cooperate with our colleagues at PESB, at the Education Research and Data Center, also cooperating with other divisions and branches of OSPI to try to make more accessible relevant workforce data so that folks in your position can help make decisions, maybe spot issues ahead of time by having some data analysis of indicators. Alicia's got the screen here. Did you intend to do that? Oh, okay, because you have the fancy sharing version. Okay,
there you go. Now we can see. It was just a little hard for me to read. So
yeah,
it's hard for me to read. It's going to be hard for everyone to read. Here you go.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Okay, so goal 3 is about mentoring. And so we've been collaborating with the best mentoring team at OSPI in different ways around this issue. We hope to collaborate with districts and ESDs as well. Family partnerships is an area that we believe could be and should be strengthened across our education institution and the initiatives that we do, but particularly in special education, there is a real need for educators to be tightly connected with parents, and that isn't always happening. And the training for that may be hard to find where any given teacher is. So we want to look into what are some options and opportunities for increasing the ways in which families can engage in this work, and teachers, school districts, and building leaders can engage with families around this. Boundary crossing infrastructure is a way of saying that, you know, we can't, just like one solution for retaining special educators isn't going to work, we neither can, and no part of the system can do it alone. That's what I'm trying to say. So also, if we're setting up, you know, regional teams or regional meetings, there is a limit to which people can have a meeting. Like, you can't have so many different monthly meetings that you don't have time to do the work. So we're looking at showing up at other already existing meetings, like Best Mentoring Roundtable, like special services directors at ESDs, those meetings. Also at meetings of teacher prep and organized meetings among education leaders in districts. So these are some of the ways that we are trying to create an infrastructure or a network of communication whereby these solutions and strategies can not only be shared, but those engaging in those kinds of activities can gather information, resources, and support from one another. Thanks, Alicia. Ready. Partners in this work have been districts, community and family support organizations, ed prep, state agencies, associations. This is just to say that boundary crossing infrastructure can't happen without a network of involved stakeholders. Thanks, Alicia. Okay, so I made a couple assumptions. Also, I had a chance to look at the registration. I think we have a lot of special education directors here, but I know, first of all, many people wear many hats, and I think that I probably haven't named all the hats that folks are representing. So would you mind in the chat putting, when you write in what I do, like I'm doing this, your name will show up. So you don't bother writing your name if you don't want to. But if you would please take this time. This also becomes a useful resource because we go back and we look at the chat and we go, oh, these are the people who were there. We can both follow up and we can just be clear about who we've had a chance to speak with and who we've not. So I see those going into the chat. Please keep doing that. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, moving right along. If you haven't had a chance to do that, please continue. And then Alicia, to the next one. We have some preliminary data. Okay, this is a caveat. There are processes and procedures by which at OSPI we verify and clarify the data we're presenting before we do so. So this is not a published version, although we are in a meeting where we want to share some preliminary data so that we can have a conversation about it. So knowing that, these are not made up numbers. These come from the S275 data system, and that's where educator data is put in by districts and then sorted and analyzed by the state. So go ahead with the next one. Okay, so looking here, we have this bar graph. Residency first issue certificates with special education endorsements for the last 10 years. Out of state issues is orange and in-state issues is blue. Okay, now does this mean every out of state is someone who moved to Washington? No. Sometimes you can live in Washington, go to the University of Internet, and then you still live in Washington and you're considered an out of state endorsement. Okay, so just bear in mind that is possible that does happen rather frequently, and there is not a data check at the OSPI to really disaggregate that at this point.
Kim, I saw you unmuting. Was that a question that you had about this?
No, I think you answered it. That was going to be my question because I did see that there is a large percentage of out of state. So thank you for clarifying that.
Doesn't mean they moved here. So the in-state programs, for it to be an in-state program, that means that program has sought and been granted approval from the Professional Educator Standards Board. They have a site in Washington. So take a Western Governors University. They actually prepare a large number of folks with special ed endorsements. Yes, they are national, but they are not out of state because they have a building here. And so they went through the process of approval as well. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this gives us some information about years of experience. So take a minute and soak this in. Numbers of special education teachers. And this is just for last year. Now, this is where part of the caveat piece is. In the S275, you can have part of your full-time equivalency be a special education teacher. So in other words, you could be 0.1 of a special education teacher. We did not include the farthest down end of that when someone was only doing it a little tiny bit. So this is where most of your work is a special education teacher. And I think that it goes without saying that if you stack up those who have taught 0 to, they're in their first 5 years, that is a significant percentage of everybody. And if you take who's in their first 10 years, that's more than the rest of them. So this is really telling in that way. You have a pretty steady decline. And this is part of the interest of our grant and of our focus. Okay, let's go ahead. That compares in this way to general education teachers. Do you see how between year 5 and year 10, in the last one, we had a drop of probably 20%, whereas here we have a drop of maybe 2%? Okay, so after 5 years, it's hard to keep being a special education teacher, this would suggest. Also, look at how we don't have, there is a precipitous drop. Once I've done my 10, I might not make it to 20. But if I made it to, or I might not make it to 15, but if I make it to 15, I'll probably make it to 20, and chances are good I'll make it to 25. All right, so this is some of the ways we're thinking about it. So if you wouldn't mind, Alicia, one back to the other one. Okay, just for one more look, this is what it looks like. We're seeing people jumping ship between 0 and 10 years, and we have about half as many, half of them are gone by 10 years. And then one more at the other for general education. Okay, and by 10 years, we still have more than 66%. So we've probably lost 30% instead of 50% over 10 years. So that matters. Okay, let's go ahead. So disaggregating across race, ethnicity. Couple points to point out. We're nowhere near representative of the student population. And almost twice as many educators of color are paraeducators. Have we been hacked, or is this Alicia? Okay, cool.
That's me, just pointing some things out.
I was
Trying
waiting
to accompany your words with visual.
to see what pictures we'd get. Okay, let's go ahead. All right, so this is a chance to just, sit and think, but be advised, we're soon going to go into a breakout room and talk about this. Okay, so those are some of the quantitative data, and I made some suggestions or implications or stories about what those data might mean, but those are just made up from a general level. And it's really important for the rest of this presentation to start thinking more specifically. So if you just take a minute and think about the special educators that you support. We just shared the demographic information that said about 12% were people of color as special education teachers, 24% as paraeducators. But we also talked about how long they'd been serving in the role. We didn't talk about the ages of those people. We didn't really talk about how they came to these positions. These are things that you might know. So what don't the numbers say about the special educators What don't, we see those precipitous declines, but we don't necessarily know what that means or why in the same way that you do. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So the next thing we're aiming at is to take that information we just discussed. We were talking about who are the teachers. We were talking about who supports them. What do you do to support them? And that's sort of to prime our thinking about those individuals, about their struggles, about your current efforts, prior to sharing what it is that these interview respondents or survey respondents shared with us about their experience with mentoring. Now, I've said this before, I'm gonna say it again. Induction is more than mentoring. It's more than what you do the day before they go to class. It's a period of time, and it involves a group of people. It involves a lot of different activities. When we asked specifically about mentoring, it was almost as if we opened a valve and people's interest in telling us what's hard about their job came out. So when you see these results, you'll notice that. But I want to underline, we're not supposing that one mentor is going to do all this, or one mentoring program can do all this. Okay, so let's go ahead with our next slide.
All right, thanks. So like Nick mentioned, this survey went out to novice special education teachers in the state for whom we had email addresses through our state system. And so for novice special educators, we defined that as educators with 1, 2, or 3 years of experience. So you can see here the range of respondents in terms of years of experience. There were 144 total responses. And of those respondents, 76% of them were assigned a mentor through their district, an official mentor. We did not ask specifically if it was a best mentor or a specific type of program, but most of our beginning special educators indicated that they did have a mentor. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start with what we tried to get at in terms of from our the respondents, what they understood as the role of their mentor, the purpose of their mentor, and and what we, I guess, expected to see versus what we are seeing from the results. So we asked on a scale from 1 to 5, what which of the following mentor supports was a priority. So for instance, we expected to see instructional support, classroom management support, but overwhelmingly we found that support with compliance requirements, IEPs, behavior intervention plans, FBAs were the #1 area of priority that these beginning special education teachers identified as most needing support. Yeah, I'll just give you a second to look at this, and we'll talk more about these results in our breakout groups in a little bit. Support finding resources, the second one that came up in terms of priority rating. You'll see that reflected in some of the other responses and open-ended responses as well. Just being able to identify, if we think about a mentor can't do everything that a special education teacher needs. There has to be a web of support, and knowing who or where to go to find that support needs to be curated for these beginning teachers, for them to know who to ask and where to go. Yeah, so we'll come back to some more related to that in a second. Okay, so of all of those areas that we asked in terms of the purpose of a mentor, these kind of closed-ended responses, the open-ended responses also revealed that beginning special educators want their mentor to be a true collaborative partner, someone that they can walk alongside with and learn with and grow with, and really trust them to have that partner role with them, as well as being an advocate for their role as well as the needs of their students with disabilities. So advocating for across the building and with administrators, the supports that are needed for students with disabilities and supporting all students in the building. But a lot of the other things that we asked directly were also reflected in the qualitative responses around needing support with compliance and IEPs, and emotional support, being able to just have an ear when things are overwhelming. Okay, next one. Okay, then we delved a little deeper and asked about the specific content that beginning special educators were interested in working with their mentor around. And so we see the top one around positive behavior supports as the most, the highest priority of need from beginning special educators. So you'll see positive behavior supports, MTSS, specially designed instruction, and social emotional learning really coming out overwhelmingly as the biggest need. What I also want to point out are at the bottom of the list here are family partnerships and culturally responsive practices. And so we've talked to various other groups about why we think we're seeing this kind of ranking of needs. And one thing that we've talked about is the difference in needs of first-year teachers versus third-year teachers, and kind of where they see the fires initially versus what they have the capacity to address as they gain more experience. So I'll give you just another minute to kind of look at these results.
And Amy, I don't think you mentioned the reason why we added the mode here is that we've found it very interesting to look at not only, because when you look at an average, it may have a very high and low spread, or it may not. And that's one of the reasons why we ran the modes to see really the most frequent number that was chosen here, and looking at the ones that where it was most frequently a 5 or a 4 was really interesting versus some of the other ones, because it's a different picture than looking at the average.
Yes, and certainly we don't know all the details about the environment that these educators are in. Are they in a building that has really adopted inclusionary practices and they need support working with their colleagues around that? Or is that something that hasn't been implemented in their building and they want more support for encouraging implementation further in their building around inclusionary practices? So we just don't know exactly what type of environment each of these educators is responding from. But yeah, we'll look at some more of the qualitative responses around these as well. So like I mentioned, and Nick said as well, we were really trying to get at what mentoring needs our novice teachers were feeling were important, but we got quite a range of different areas of support. And this goes back to what are the systems and structures and personnel and resources in place at the district? What's that web of available support so that novice teachers can get support in these areas where they are saying, yes, I need help with this. And maybe that's the mentor's role, or maybe it's not. But induction support in particular is not often the role of the mentor, but at the district level, how are beginning teachers getting the information that they need on policies and processes and other building specific procedures? One thing that's, a lot of this does obviously align with the research and the other items that were part of the survey. But what was interesting about the language that respondents use around paraeducators was not necessarily about collaboration. It was about managing and supervising. So a different lens of how they referred to working with paraeducators. Again, legal requirements of IDEA and behavior assessments. Also, what came out a lot in the qualitative responses and the open-ended items was around administrative support, collaborating with general education teachers, and not feeling like they had the time or the space or the authority to be able to navigate those situations. And they wanted specific help working with difficult colleagues. But especially around needing administrators who were knowledgeable of the law and could support all students, in particular students with disabilities, in implementing the IEP appropriately. So really having some knowledgeable support and advocacy around special ed law. The workload, again, what is it that a mentor can, what support can a mentor provide, and what needs to come from just thinking about what is the role of that special education teacher, what's on their plate, what can they prioritize, what can be delegated to other support personnel and paraeducators, and figuring out how to manage all of those priorities and juggle those expectations is known to be challenging to a lot of beginning special educators. But how can either the mentor or other building personnel structure their day and their time to kind of protect the priorities that they do want to focus on? The family and community, just one more thing about family and community partnerships that really didn't come up a lot, and as you saw in the previous slide, that was lower on the list of priorities. But there was one really great response from somebody who just said they couldn't emphasize enough how important that relationship was in building their, in supporting the students in their class and understanding the environment. I was hoping for a little bit more self-awareness around that, but yeah.
That's a box. I think a lot of times it's especially in the beginning, not knowing what you don't know and not knowing what you really need and what you would really benefit from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Okay. Just going back to who these respondents are, or I'm sorry, this was the mentor characteristic that was most important. So this was just a forced choice question item, and 85% of novice special education teachers want a mentor who has experience teaching in a similar setting or students with similar characteristics. However, what you'll see in the open-ended responses is that's necessary but not sufficient. They need support at the building level through those building protocols and processes and procedures who can support a lot of different areas of their growth. Okay. So again, the characteristics of a mentor, who do they want? What kind of a person do they need in that mentor role? And like I mentioned, they want someone with a background in special education, but they also need someone who is in their building and can help guide them through those through the day and through whatever those protocols are. But someone who is safe, easy to talk to, calm and thoughtful demeanor, and supportive and responsive. Obviously, the things that all of these qualities that we want in our mentors, but how are we creating an opportunity for our mentors to have the space and the availability to be proactive and responsive and available when the mentee needs their support. And practices, again, going back to beginning educators' desire for someone who can be a true collaborative partner. They want to be able to share ideas, share experience, have that traditional gradual release of from the relationship, and providing support, direct support on the IEP. So some very specific technical support, as well as more general best practices. Okay. I think this is pretty straightforward and expected. Meeting in person was the primary mode of what mentees desired in meeting with their mentor. But instructional observations, that's a key component of the BEST program. It's also what beginning educators have experienced through their pre-service preparation. So that's kind of embedded in how they have grown through their practice in learning, or through their training to become educators. But also this participation in PD with a mentor, this co-learning opportunity, we feel, we've talked about this as being a very valuable experience, not just for the mentee, but for the mentor as well. Okay, again, going back to the program structures, our respondents indicated, what would you want for your mentor? What is the structure of a mentoring program that would best support your mentor in supporting you? And they talked about being able to have regular contact that's expected at a regular interval, opportunities for observations and debriefs. But so many of them expressed that they knew their mentor just didn't have the time and the capacity to meet all of their needs. They had unmanageable workloads themselves, and so they didn't want to burden their mentor with more responsibilities and more time with them, and recognizing the value of their mentor and wanting their mentor to be compensated for their time and be available to them. So that was what they were asking for, really more time, more consistent time that was protected. And the mentor match, sorry, one more thing about that. There was some comments about being able to either have a say in who their mentor was, if that was an option, being able to know that was going to be a good relationship fit, but also the opportunity to end the relationship if it was no longer meeting their needs. Okay. And then finally, just more general working condition comments beyond the mentor-mentee relationship. But respondents indicated that they did not have access to curriculum materials that they needed or assessments. They didn't get the support that they felt they needed from their mentor because their mentor wasn't available. They felt that the administration didn't support them in the ways that they needed. Again, this difficulty with collaborating with gen ed colleagues, they're not protected time, that PLC time to collaborate. They weren't viewed as instructional leaders or consultants for their gen ed colleagues, and just the general workload of trying to do it all. So, I mean, we've seen this in the research. I mean, this is all what you are saying as the issues that are causing our special education teachers to burn out. They're not feeling that they're included in the community. They're feeling isolated. They're not supported. And these are the reasons that they're not able to commit their energy to supporting the students. So these were some of our takeaways from the survey, but when we go into groups, we will we'll be able to talk more about what implications you see for your districts and regions. But a mentor can't do it all. There has to be other district supports. Who's the web? Who's part of the web of support and resources? The orientation, from orientation to the building to the central office administrators. What are the expectations of the mentors, and how is that communicated out to the mentees? How are we structuring that role and the other roles, the other support roles, to complete or to meet all of those needs? And figuring out ways, as we've talked about, to get both in building and a mentor with special education background to meet the variety of needs for those educators.
So I'm going to take over and just share a little bit more about some considerations for the systems that we designed to support and also retain special educators. First we're going to share two different resources with you, and I'm wondering if Nick or Amy, you could put links to both of those in the chat for people as we're going through these slides. Seeing someone's email. Okay. So as we go through these next few slides, we want to acknowledge, and I know we've said it over and over and over again, that mentoring is a critical component of a comprehensive induction program, but we know it's not enough on its own. And we know that really to truly support induction and long-term retention of special educators, we have to have this web of support for educators. And that really does include a multi-pronged approach to induction. And it also includes designing really supportive work contexts for our special educators. And so comprehensive induction programs have a lot of different components to them. And these supportive work contexts often include like a lot of different aspects that make up that full web of support. And so in the next few slides, we're really going to be drawing on two key resources that I just asked Nick and Amy to share in the chat. And one is the Standards for High Quality Beginning Educator Induction Programs from OSPI's Beginning Educator Support Team. So many of you might be aware that this resource exists on specifically comprehensive induction programs. Right now, they're also in the middle of revising that. And so we should see a new edition sometime soon. And then the other resource that we're drawing from today comes out of the University of Florida, and it's specific to the induction of beginning special educators. So it talks about all of those components of supportive work context and a comprehensive induction program that are unique to special educators' roles. We're going to dive into each of these areas that you see on the screen in the coming slides. And we're also just going to share some additional strategies that really build on what we learned from that survey, the survey results that we just shared. They also align with current research on induction and retention of special educators and align with our grant, our KEYS grant strategy map. So next slide, please. So we'll first just dive into those components or those aspects of a comprehensive induction program for teachers of special education. And we just wanted to share a quote from the best induction standards. And I'll read it aloud for everyone. And it says, high quality induction moves beyond offering a summer orientation and mentoring that's dependent on the generosity of beginning educators' colleagues. It provides ongoing job-embedded professional learning and support. And so we chose this quote because induction is so much more than just the emotional support or maybe mentoring. It really also needs to focus on the professional growth of educators. And I'll share that in those first couple years, special educators, they form those like inclusive commitments, their pedagogies that they're going to carry forward well into their career. And so when we're thinking about our induction programs, we need to also start thinking about how are we providing opportunities for professional growth and support so that educators can develop those skills and the self-efficacy to continue teaching. So next slide, great. So one of the first areas that we really focus on, and this is for all of our folks from HR that are on our webinar right now, as well as our special ed directors and anyone else that's involved in hiring. One of the critical components of retention that we often overlook or may not be forefront, or we may not be thinking of it as a component of an induction program, is really our hiring practices. And so when there's a strong fit between beginning special educators and their assigned work context, they're more likely to enter into their first year with the skills, knowledge, and some self-efficacy to really fulfill those teaching responsibilities and meet their student needs. So when we're hiring beginning special educators, hiring teams really need to know and understand their employment needs and the context in which they'll be placing new teachers. They should be really transparent and intentional about recruitment and sharing information about the role, as well as information about what supports are available for teachers as they enter. And then when they're selecting candidates, really seeking to find that optimal fit between the applicant and the specific role. And one thing that we talked about in my past breakout room is just understanding where patterns of attrition may be in your district and thinking about what's in that context. How can there be an intentional job match or role match when you're hiring? So it really means that our hiring teams should be considering aspects of job matching, such as the area of disability that a teacher might be teaching, the age and the grade level, the content preparation, and then the program model, and looking at those aspects in relation to a candidate's experience, their strengths, their preferences, as a way to support that strong job matching. So orientation was something that came up a lot in our survey results, and we heard things like, I never got an orientation as a beginning teacher. I still don't know how to use our district technology. I need support with really understanding things like our key policies and procedures. And so one critical component of a strong comprehensive induction program is providing orientation for beginning educators. And that strong orientation is necessary for all teachers. But then there are some specifics that need to be addressed for our beginning special educators. So the information that we provide in orientation includes, all of the key information that teachers would need to perform their job duties and to navigate their context and roles. And so for all educators, this really should include information about key policies that they need to be following and be aware of, how to access specific resources. I think part of that also is sharing with beginning teachers who they can contact if they need additional support. Having information and orientation about role expectations, which includes also instructional expectations, and making that connection to their mentor. And then for our beginning special educators, orientation really should include information that's necessary for their specific roles. And so things like the technology and the procedures that are required for IEP development or evaluations, expectations for working with paraeducators, supporting paraeducators, and some information around how to create schedules, and really start thinking about organizing and managing caseloads. So on the screen, you're seeing the themes and categories that we identified from the qualitative results of the survey, and Amy shared those on what beginning educators identified as their desired purpose or the functions of a mentor. And what we talked about is, you know, one person can't really be responsible for doing all of these things. And also, I think we need to also see or understand how much is asked of our mentors and the versatility that they may need to be able to support beginning special educators. And so, you know, we can't assume that, you know, all good teachers are also going to be great mentors. We need to be able to give them the skills that they need to be successful, to be mentors. And so when we invest in initial and ongoing training, we can really support mentors with developing the skills that they need to provide support, and also the skills that they need to support beginning special educators with, you know, doing their own problem solving, or generating ideas to either overcome challenges or to support the students in their classroom. And successful district mentoring include two components: that initial training that prepares mentors for their roles and responsibilities. And then the second is just ongoing opportunities for mentors that really do support their continued development, and then provides them with assistance for navigating challenging situations that may arrive in their mentoring roles. And so many of our districts, and maybe some of you on this call, are involved in the Best Mentoring Grant, which does provide training for mentors, a very comprehensive mentor training, as well as ongoing opportunities for mentors to come together monthly to engage in shared learning, to engage in shared problem solving. And so those are really good opportunities for mentors to continue to develop their skills so that they can best support our beginning special educators. So in our survey, our beginning special educators indicated that they needed support with professional development in the first 3 years of their role. And specifically, they wanted professional development that was relevant to their roles and their contexts. And so we also know, if we're thinking about adult learning and we're thinking about best practices for professional development, that effective professional development has to be sustained, it has to be job embedded, and it has to be applicable and relevant to educators' roles. And some of the things that we heard in the survey were, you know, I'm always included with the gen ed professional development, but I never really receive professional development that's specific to my role in special education. And so as districts plan their professional learning for the year, it's important to really consider beginning special educators' professional development needs, and really consider how mentors may be able to provide follow-up support for beginning special education teachers as they apply their learning apply their learning from professional development in their classroom. So really thinking about how mentors can be that bridge to support beginning special educators with trying a new strategy or really applying their learning. And the other thing, and Amy mentioned this earlier in the presentation that came up, that I think is an interesting concept to consider as we're thinking about mapping out professional development for the year and supporting beginning special educators, is that we received comments that from beginning special educators that they see value in participating in shared learning and professional development with their mentor. So having that co-learning and having that support, which also then supports our mentors and beginning special educators with applying that learning in the classroom. So several beginning special educators who responded to our survey identified the value of receiving ongoing feedback in a supportive context throughout their first years of teaching. And the survey respondents identified mentors and also administrators as key personnel who could provide that ongoing feedback that was in alignment with their evaluation system. We had comments that support with navigating the teacher education or evaluation system, and then having some practice with being observed and receiving feedback were important supports from mentors. So when beginning special educators can really receive on a support of somebody like our, it really does support their professional growth and can positively impact students. And supporting mentors by providing them with the time and training to be able to go in and observe their mentee, to provide supportive feedback, can be a really important factor in educator growth and also their retention. So kind of the last aspect that we'll touch on the comprehensive induction program just revolves around development and refinement of an induction program and recognizing that this should really be an ongoing process. And so you know, having a team at the district level that can have some methods in place to evaluate the effectiveness of their induction program and make adjustments as necessary to meet the needs of beginning special educators and the students and families that they serve. And so, you know, I mentioned this earlier of how often are we asking our beginning teachers what they need? You know, do we have feedback loops in place? Where we can really get input and data from a variety of sources to evaluate whether or not our induction support as a district is meeting their needs. And so, you know, when we're looking at our programs and we're evaluating whether or not they're meeting the needs, we really need to have a group that has, you know, wide representation, including beginning special educators, mentors, students, and families that are really involved in this process of evaluating whether or not our programs are working the way that we want them to for induction. So we want to be looking at things like alignment between our stated induction program goals and then the components that we have in place to see if we're meeting those goals. And then as you've seen earlier in the presentation, you know, the survey that we did is one method of data collection that could be helpful. But teams should also be looking at a variety of data sources such as exit interviews, attrition data across buildings or across classrooms even, student level data, and then input from educators, families, and students. And so as we're evaluating our programming, exploring the data, there might be the need for revisions to a program, and that might happen continually to make sure that we're meeting our induction program goals. And so just recognizing that as revisions are made, teams should also be considering what supports might be necessary to implement those changes and then to continue monitoring our induction programs. So now just moving a little bit more into a supportive community and work context for special educators. So the first one that we'll start with is just deliberate role design, and beginning special education teachers may not always understand what leaders expect of them. And this can really interfere with their effectiveness and contribute to a lot of anxiety and stress. And some novice special educators experience what we call role conflict, which occurs when there are other personnel like district administrators, principals, mentors, or teachers that have different expectations for them. And there's a lot of research on role conflict for special education teachers and how that can contribute to attrition. There's also a lot of research on role ambiguity. And so when people don't know what's expected of them and don't know what their role is, it can really lead to burnout. And so when we're thinking about deliberate role design, it's necessary for us as districts to be able to articulate to our beginning special educators and everybody that works with them the expectations of their role and their specific job responsibilities. And I say that these need to be communicated out to building administrators and also their colleagues, just so that we can support our teachers with having consistent expectations. And so when we're thinking about a supportive work context and this deliberate role design, districts should consider how to reduce caseload numbers and expectations as beginning special educators are learning their role and then gradually taking on more responsibilities in their role. And so they should be really explicit in defining those job expectations and the priorities for teachers, providing support for scheduling and accessing the resources that are really relevant and necessary for their specific role. And then buildings should have a plan in place to support with school-wide positive behavioral support and discipline. So it's not just falling on our special educators to support the behavioral needs of students. And then other supportive strategies really include providing support to beginning special educators with facilitating meetings. And we heard that in our survey that a lot of beginning special educators wanted somebody with them for those first couple IEP meetings. Support with working with paraeducators and managing time and organizing themselves for case management. And then thinking that this support can kind of gradually be reduced as beginning special educators learn their role and take on more responsibility. So the next area of a supportive work context, and this should align with everyone's thinking in this space, and I know it's come up in breakout rooms, is just the importance that building administrators play in induction support. And research shows that building administrators can really be influential in a special educator's intent to remain in the profession. And our building administrators as instructional and building leaders really do lead the way for establishing a school's culture and climate. And so supportive cultures and climates that are, welcoming, inclusive, they really foster psychological safety and also provide emotional support when necessary. Those contexts prioritize collaboration and have structures in place to facilitate collaboration between general and special education teachers, and then encourage connection between teachers. And these are all key to really establishing that web of support for all educators and in creating these inclusive cultures where there's a shared responsibility for educating all students. So inclusionary practices, is a shared system responsibility and also a factor that relates to retention. And as we learned from our survey, many special educators indicated that they needed support to facilitate inclusionary practices. And this was either through administrative support for collaborating with general education teachers, or assistance with communicating general education and special education teachers' expectations and responsibilities for implementing inclusionary practices. And we know collaboration with general education and strong leadership are necessary for really creating that shared responsibility and creating the structures and systems that ensure that all students with disabilities are provided with opportunities to receive rigorous, high quality instruction and experience that sense of belonging with their peers. And so professional development and coaching for all teachers and inclusionary practices is an ongoing statewide need, and one that we feel is really essential to special educator retention. And then the final factor that we'll share around these supportive community and work partnerships is really on family and community partnerships. And this figure comes from OSPI's Title I programs, and it really outlines the critical components and skills that are necessary for building meaningful partnerships with families and communities. And we know academic success starts at home and it consolidates at school, and with continuous partnership and support of families. And so we know that educators need that support to build trusting relationships with families and to build and foster authentic partnerships. And they also need to develop those skills to uplift and integrate the wisdom and strengths of our students and families. And so districts should really consider ways that they're providing professional development and ongoing coaching as educators develop these skills and continually reflect on how they're partnering with our families and communities. And as Nick mentioned, the KEYS grant focuses on family and community partnerships as a key driver for special educator retention, and one that's really necessary for ensuring that all students receive an equitable and inclusive education that's responsive to their identities and their strengths and needs.
Erin, thanks for that. So those systemic supports, just to back up, those systemic supports emerge from this notion that mentoring can't be all of it. But what else is there? So it's these series of things that have been tried, that can be tried, that you may be doing in one way or another, that in our work, we're recommending that folks really investigate what works, what is working, what hasn't been tried that could be, to start to focus on these issues. And or I should say continue to, because I do know that it is a strong focus already. We have an opportunity here to help with that, and that's what we want to share in the next slide. So one thing I'll point out is that we'll make these slides available to you, so you can go back and review those details and those strategies and do some self-assessment. We had an opportunity through some unobligated Title II funds that we could use to provide districts money to try out some of these things. So as we said, the KEYS grant is to come up with a statewide plan that could be differentiated across districts, which is another way of saying come up with some good ideas and encourage people to try them. However, trying new ideas often definitely costs time, but also costs money. And so with these unobligated funds, what we're hoping to do is create opportunity. With the amount of funds we have, we can create opportunity for 15 districts. Each of these 15 districts will be eligible for $60,000 in 2 different grants. The first grant is $20,000, and it's for participating in our KEYS task force, which will be coming up in January. Participate in a networked improvement community, which is an organized group. It's a professional learning community with tighter goals and some stricter processes made out of implementation science findings. So participate in the task force, participate in the networked improvement community, and produce a strategic recruitment, induction, and retention plan. So to actually do some of those analyses, to really look at what is it that we are doing that could be working better, what aren't we doing that we could try, and what are we doing that we should stop doing. So that plan will be part of the networked improvement community. So in other words, as we go through these network improvement community meetings, you produce something between meetings and you bring that, and then at the end, put that together. So in April, you have a comprehensive plan, and you can include in that plan up to $40,000 that you do not have to do specific professional development related activities. And that money then would be provided so that you could kickstart something in your plan. There are a few strings attached. For example, it's Title II money, so it can't be used for everything, but it can be used for a lot of things that would fit in this work. Also, those funds would have to be used by a date certain, but if you were involved in the grant, we would help you figure out how to plan for that. So what's the opportunity? We're going to launch a grant for individual districts who would like to apply. We're going to prioritize those districts with about 3 or more special education teachers. those who have had significant challenges with teacher retention, who have not broadly implemented inclusive practices, and have relatively low proficiency rates among students with disabilities on state assessments. If you fall outside of these categories, can you still apply? Yes, you can. But what we're doing with this is trying to target what is eventually, you know, a limited amount of money to where we think it can make the most impact. Okay, so this grant will be launching this month. It'll have a short turnaround time, and it's got a really low barrier application because we know it has a short turnaround time. We're not asking for pages and pages and pages of writing. Instead, we want you to articulate your level of need and some specific aspects of the district in which you work. Okay, so any questions about the grant opportunity?
Nick, I'm sorry, did I miss the date in which that's going to open?
Well, it's in the queue, so to say. So we have submitted it to iGrants. We have to wait for them to process this. So it'll be open within a week, I would like to say, but it might be 10 days. And that's kind of up to them. So as soon as it's open, we'll share it with everybody. And I think I saw a hand. I was guessing it was Michelle. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe they're gone. Oh, there we go. Please go ahead. I just see Tumwater. Chris.
Gotta find the mute button. Is it teacher specific or would ESAs be included in that novice as well?
In this, we're going to prioritize teachers. And it could be that if you make an application and you indicate this is our focus, that we could look at it if interest is low. Also, a lot of the strategic planning and the activities and opportunities you're pursuing, it could be comprehensive. You know, it could involve teachers as well as ESAs. There's nothing against that. Also, in our work group, we talked about how a lot of the teachers of special education right now are paras who demonstrated interest and potential. So that is a teacher-related focus, isn't it? Even though it is an ESA-related focus too. Okay, a couple other hands, Shannon and then Sarah.
So when you say that it's educators with 3 years of lesser experience, is that specific to special ed or teaching period?
You know, it's actually specific to special ed, not necessarily teaching specific. So if you say, well, I've got two who are brand new and one of them was a gen ed teacher last year and they're a sped teacher this year, they're still a novice sped teacher. So you can consider yourself interested there.
Perfect.
And Sarah?
I lowered my hand instead of unmuting. Would there be an opportunity or would it fit for any type of consortium application that might help districts that have fewer than 3 special education teachers get together and collaborate? Yes,
multiple districts can collaborate if they would like. Here's the strictures. The money can only go to districts.
Yeah.
So that being said, if it's a couple of districts want to get together and make one comprehensive plan, and maybe you've got like part A that mostly fits us over here and part B kind of fits us over here, you want to come together, I think that's good. I think that's good and it's welcome. Kim.
So to be part of the initial piece of this, so for the planning of the grant, is that this might sound like a strange question, but is that inclusive of applying for the grant? In other words, could a district participate in that piece, but not necessarily want to move forward with the other pieces of the grant?
Yeah, that's why we set it up as 2 grants. So let's say two scenarios could happen. You apply for the $20,000 for strategic plan. And if the way I was thinking about that broadly was about a day a week. Does this fund a person for about a day a week to put this together? It could be multiple people who collaborate in some way, but maybe you've got a lead on it. Anyway, let's say you put a strategic plan together and that's all the farther you want to go. What that's going to do is create a little bit more resource availability for the other 14 or so districts who want to go on. And they might say, yeah, I 40,000 is awesome, but if I could get 45, that'd be better, because then I could do this. That would create that flexibility. So part of the plan is going to involve kind of, well, what would you do with that? Which is a soft way of saying you apply for the 40,000 by articulating what you're going to do in your plan. But yeah, you can jump early, no problem there. What might be hard about this is that, so April 15th, you submit your plan and it has 40,000. We're going to quickly turn around and say, okay, you got the money, it's on the way. Or, you know, we can't exactly give it to you. We have to pay you for certain activities and they have to be done by a certain time. So we'll have to have conversations about what could be that could be used for. But this is really an opportunity for trying to strike while the iron's hot, so to say, because this money was sitting there. It's one-time money. How do you make it go as far as possible? Maybe helping kickstart strategic plans on an area of statewide critical shortage would be good. That's what we're doing. Good deal. I'm seeing nods, which is nice. I'm not seeing any more raised hands, so I want to invite you, if you do have any other questions, to reach out to us. And this is how you can get a hold of us. If you lose these numbers, you can reach out to, you know, anybody who does have contact with OSPI SPED can put you in touch with us.
I'd say you can reach out to your regional special ed teacher or special education director at the ESD level. They'll get you connected.
Thanks. Nice, Erin. We'll get to the presenting team. Well done. Thank you very much. Really fun to work with you as always. And to those guests, thanks for coming and spending this time with us. Sometimes calling the question and calling the problem can advance solutions, especially when we get opportunities to discuss. So we're going to take seriously the conversations and comments that we have in the notes and pull that into our work. And you'll certainly hear from us again. And we want to thank you again for joining. Bye for now.